Ugh, I've had enough. I was at my wit's end, standing in front of my husband and in-laws. It was the day we were supposed to go on a trip to Hawaii. And my mother-in-law had just told me, "I don't remember inviting you." Carter, my husband, just gave me a look that said he wanted to get through this awkward moment as quickly as possible, offering no help. I was done with these people. My name is Rita Rollins. I'm 28 years old. Before getting married, I worked as a bartender. I've always loved drinks, and right after graduating from college, I got a job at a privately owned bar. That's where I met Carter, who had been a regular there even before I started working. I heard from the owner that he was a quiet guy, but he started talking to me more after my second shift. We were the same age, hit it off, and eventually our relationship turned romantic. We got married 6 months ago. Until I married Carter, I had never moved out of my parents' home. There were 2 reasons for that. First, my workplace was very close to my home. Second, my dad was extremely protective of me. I lost my mom to illness, and being an only child, I was always the apple of my dad's eye. But he didn't just spoil me. He knew when to be strict. My dad is a wealthy businessman, so I've never had to worry about money. I was able to go to college thanks to his financial support. I don't know all the details, but he seems to be involved in managing several companies. He cried so much at my wedding that the staff had to caution him. But he trusted Carter and sent me off as a bride. So I finally moved out and started my life with Carter. But reality was different from what I had dreamed. It all started when my mother-in-law began visiting our home. After marrying Carter, I quit my job and became a homemaker. Carter works as a driver for a small transportation company. He leaves early in the morning and comes home late at night, so I had a lot of free time. That's when my mother-in-law started to meddle in my life. One day, after seeing Carter off and doing some laundry, the doorbell rang. I checked the monitor and saw it was her. "Hello?" "Oh, has Carter gone to work?" "Yes, he just left." "I brought these cupcakes that Carter loves. Could you give them to him?" "Thanks for your kindness. We'll enjoy them later." I thought my response was perfectly polite, but she suddenly frowned and said, "What are you talking about? There's none for you. I made these for Carter." Her words were so cold and pointed that they hurt me a bit. Seeing me look down, she said, "Don't be so sensitive. Just let me in already," and pushed past me into the house. Leaving me stunned, she headed straight for the living room. I hurriedly followed her. "By the way, there's something I want to talk to you about." As soon as she sat on the sofa, she said it. I had no idea what she was talking about, so I just waited for her to continue. "When am I going to see my first grandchild?" "What? We don't have plans for that anytime soon." "What do you mean, no plans? You're worthless as a wife then." My mother-in-law's unexpected visit was filled with nothing but derogatory comments towards me. Carter and I had decided to wait until we were 30 to have kids. We're not financially stable yet, and we don't want to bring a child into a world where they'd struggle. But my mother-in-law dismissed our plans, saying I had no value. Isn't that our choice to make? She didn't expect me to talk back. She furrowed her brows and yelled, "How dare you defy me? A wife who can't even give me grandchildren." "I never said I can't have children. I said the timing isn't right." "A woman who can't give birth when I want her to is as worthless as one who can't give birth at all." I felt irritated by her words and fired back, but she didn't stop. "Enough! This is pointless." With that, she left. That night, Carter looked at me apologetically and said, "Hey, Rita, we should have a kid." "Did your mom say something to you?" I immediately suspected that the events of the day had something to do with this impressed Carter. But he remained silent, looking down. "Tell me the truth. Your mom said something, didn't she?"
"Well, it's both. Dad yelled at me to get you pregnant already. Probably Mom's idea. Dad has always been under Mom's thumb."
I felt my spirits sink. Carter is kind to me, but he lacks assertiveness. I knew he wasn't confrontational, but he never complains even when things are against him. Now I was sure. It's not that he won't say anything. He can't. "I'm going to your parents' house tomorrow. Our home and my in-laws are just a 20-minute drive apart. I could go there any time."
"But what if we just have a kid like they want? Wouldn't that calm them down?"
I was infuriated by Carter's weak response. "Do you really want to have a child now? Have you forgotten that we agreed to wait until we saved some money?"
"Well, can't we just ask your dad for money? He's really wealthy, right?"
I sighed deeply and stopped preparing dinner. Then I looked at Carter and said, "Don't you find that embarrassing? If we have a child, we're the parents. How do you plan to raise a child when we can't even manage our own finances?" When I said this assertively, Carter deflated and mumbled,
"Sorry,"
ending the conversation. I've always been strong-willed, even handling customer complaints when I was a bartender. Carter, despite being an athlete, is weak-willed. He may look muscular and strong, but he has a fragile heart, a disappointing balance. The next day, as promised, I visited my in-laws. The person who opened the door was my mother-in-law. "Oh, what brings you here all of a sudden? It's rare for you to visit. Come in." She treated me with unexpected courtesy. Walking into the living room, I saw my father-in-law scrutinizing a pile of brochures on the table. "Mother-in-law, about yesterday. It's about having kids." I'd like to get straight to the point, so I tried to steer the conversation that way. But father-in-law interrupted me.
"Rita, if we go on vacation for Christmas, would you prefer Hawaii or Florida?"
I was speechless, not understanding the sudden change in topic. Father-in-law's tone hardened.
"Can't you even answer a simple question?"
"My dear, it's okay. Rita is a worthless person after all." Father-in-law yelled, and mother-in-law made a condescending comment. I felt my anger rising. But I decided to hold back, not wanting to stoop to their level. "I'd choose Hawaii. Crossing the ocean makes it feel more like a vacation."
"All right, let's go with Hawaii then."
"By the way, why Hawaii?"
"We got a bonus, and we want to go to a seaside destination with Carter."
I couldn't reconcile this with father-in-law, with the man who had been pressuring me to have children through Carter. I had assumed it would be a trip for just mother-in-law and father-in-law, but apparently I was wrong. But I would realize my mistake much later. Father-in-law seemed in high spirits now that the vacation spot was decided. I lost the urge to bring up yesterday's issues and ruin his mood, so I decided to leave quietly. But mother-in-law stopped me. "What is it?" "I thought you should have this." She handed me a folded letter-sized paper. When I opened it, it was filled with names. Frederick, Dylan, Jerry, Oliver, what is this? "It's a list of names for our grandchild. Pick one when the baby is born." "What?" I couldn't help but shout. Yesterday, she was berating me for not having kids, and today she's handing me a list of names for a child we haven't even planned yet? and upon closer inspection, there were no names that seemed suitable for a girl. Do you plan to give me a list for girls too? Mother-in-law looked at me as if I was absurd. What are you talking about? We only want a boy. We can't let the Rollins lineage die out. That list is based on the assumption you'll have a boy. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What could I possibly say to that? Her way of thinking was so outlandish that I started to question my own sanity. For the first time in my life, I had met someone with such a different sense of common decency. Look, I have many questions, but let's stick to one due to time constraints. What if a girl is born? My voice trembled slightly with suppressed anger. I felt like lunging at mother-in-law right then and there. That's simple. We just won't acknowledge her as our grandchild. If a girl is born, still name her from this list. If you don't like that, then do your best to have a boy. Mother-in-law said this with a mocking smile. Meanwhile, father-in-law was engrossed in online shopping, probably looking for things to take to Hawaii. I caught a glimpse of swimsuit images on his screen. Suddenly, I felt a headache coming on and left my in-laws' house. When I got home, I told Carter about today's events. He just hummed. Not offering much in response.
Shouldn't we focus on preparing for Hawaii first? When did they say we were going?
You know, I started to speak but stopped myself. Arguing now wouldn't solve anything with Carter. It made more sense to prepare for the upcoming trip. We were leaving this weekend. During the Christmas break, and Carter also had time off from work.
We don't have time to buy new stuff. Come to think of it, we don't even have a suitcase.
My dad has some. I'll borrow them tomorrow. My dad loves to travel and has several suitcases. Borrowing a couple wouldn't be a big deal. I contacted him on my phone and arranged to pick them up the next day. On the day of the trip, having successfully borrowed the suitcases, Carter and I headed to the meeting point mentioned in a message from mother-in-law to Carter. When we arrived, my in-laws were already there. Sorry to keep you waiting. I apologized as soon as we got there. But my in-laws looked at me strangely.
Honey, did you invite Rita?
No.
What's going on with the both of you?
Like Carter, I was clueless about what was happening. Then mother-in-law said with a feigned, innocent expression, "We don't remember inviting Rita." Time seemed to freeze for Carter and me. What do you mean? You said with Carter, didn't you? Mother-in-law laughed loudly. That meant with our parents, too. This isn't the only meeting point. You can't be serious. Of course, we wouldn't invite a useless daughter-in-law. Carter, here's your ticket. Mother-in-law handed the plane ticket to Carter right in front of me. I felt a chilling humiliation, as if I'd been deliberately excluded. It was a huge insult. They must have intentionally misled me, as evidenced by their creepy smiles. When I glanced at Carter, he just looked down, avoiding eye contact. So he won't even help me now. At that moment, I lost all interest in dealing with these people, including Carter. Even if I had gone on the trip, it would never have been a meaningful experience. Fine, whatever, I said, dragging my suitcase filled with pointless hopes and excitement away from the scene. I returned home, unpacked the suitcases, and headed straight to my parents' house. I thought I'd tell them what happened today while returning the unused suitcases. When I arrived, my overprotective dad greeted me with a hug. I found his boyfriend-like hugs a bit annoying, but I was also grateful for his affection.
Did you enjoy your trip to Hawaii?
He asked with sparkling eyes. He probably wished he could have gone with me, but I shattered that expectation. I didn't go because I'm the daughter-in-law. Confused, my dad asked,
"What do you mean?"
As to answer his question, I recounted everything that had happened up to today.
That's terrible, especially on Carter's part. A husband's job is to protect his wife, even if the opponents are his own parents. I had to stand up to my in-laws who opposed our marriage, and that's how I got to marry your mom.
My dad said. He's a cheerful guy who mixes humor into his conversations, making them enjoyable. But his eyes weren't laughing this time.
Is Carter's dad's name Fred Rollins, and he works at New Wave Corporation, right?
I didn't know why he was asking, but I nodded because he was correct.
Just leave the rest to Daddy,
he said with a smile, ending the conversation. The day Carter and his parents were supposed to return from Hawaii arrived. I was summoned by my dad, and we headed to the airport together. We waited in the arrival lobby for Carter and his parents. 30 minutes later, they emerged, talking and laughing. My dad immediately approached the trio. I hurriedly followed. Carter was the first to notice my dad. He stopped dead in his tracks, looking as if he'd seen a ghost. His parents noticed his reaction. Just as mother-in-law asked Carter, "What's wrong?" My dad spoke up.
"Hello, I'm Rita's father."
The three reacted nervously to his words.
Hello.
Father-in-law responded with his tone much weaker than when he had spoken to me.
"Do you know why I'm here?"
The aura my dad emitted was intense. He's built a massive fortune over the years and knows how to control the conversation. The three seemed to know what this was about. They looked down, trying to avoid the issue. My dad took a step closer and said,
"I heard my daughter was excluded from the Hawaii trip. Is that correct?" Well... Carter, didn't I tell you to take good care of my daughter when you asked for her hand in marriage? You've betrayed that trust, haven't you?
Carter glanced at my dad's face for a moment, then quickly looked away, mumbling,
"I'm sorry."
But my dad didn't let that go.
Apologizing means you've done something wrong, doesn't it, Mr. Rollins?
Both Carter and mother-in-law were at a loss for words. Though the airport was bustling, our corner felt like a different world. Thanks to my dad steering us to a less crowded area, no one was paying us much attention.
Mr. Rollins, let me make one thing clear. If you don't honestly tell me what happened, I won't forgive you.
On the defensive, Carter and his parents finally had father-in-law speak up, perhaps to save face.
What do you mean, won't forgive? What are you planning to do? I'll shut down your workplace. Haha, what a joke.
Father-in-law started laughing but trailed off as he met my dad's serious gaze.
You work at New Wave Corporation, right? The bank recently approached me about providing funding and management reforms for New Wave. If I decide it's not worth saving, the bank wants to pull its funding before the debt grows any further. I was considering helping out, given that it's the company where my daughter's father-in-law works, but it seems like it's not worth it after all.
For the first time, father-in-law's eyes, which had been locked down on me, began to twitch.
You can't mix personal matters with business. You'll leave not just me, but the other employees out on the street.
Father-in-law's face turned pale, but my dad was relentless.
I don't mind. It's a company that is bound to fail sooner or later. Besides, my daughter is more important than employees losing their jobs. I really wanted Carter to take on this role, but it seems I misjudged him. Sorry, Rita. My intuition failed me this time.
Carter looked miserable, unable to argue against the accusations. From my perspective, I felt more secure with someone like my dad who truly cared about me. Come on, both of you. Stand up for yourselves. Say something, darlings. You too, Carter. Mother-in-law was panicking, but my dad didn't let her off the hook either.
Mrs. Rollins, you're also part of the problem, aren't you? Why are you trying to force Rita to have a child against her will? Let's hear your excuse.
My dad glared at mother-in-law with a low, stern voice. Mother-in-law flinched, unable to respond.
Have a boy? Choose a name from this list? She's worthless? Who do you think you are?
Well... Mother-in-law was increasingly cornered by my dad, sweat forming on her forehead. But my dad didn't stop.
If you're going to make arbitrary decisions, then so will we. First, we'll have Rita separate from Carter. What?
Carter looked up shocked.
The discussion with my daughter is already done. The divorce papers are filled out. Without Rita, you won't even have the chance for grandchildren. We were looking forward to seeing our grandchildren. I don't care. I won't sacrifice my daughter for your selfish desires. Even I, as her father, don't interfere in her life. You have no right to.
The three of them were flustered, and no one spoke.
You'll pay the price for trying to control Rita's life. Please, I love Rita. Forgive us.
At the very end, Carter pleaded with my dad, but my dad merely glanced at him.
That's not for me to decide.
When my dad's gaze turned to me, I clearly said, "Please don't include me in your lives anymore. Goodbye," rejecting Carter's plea. Carter groaned, "Oh!" and mother-in-law started to cry, possibly out of shock. Father-in-law just stood there stunned. A week later, the divorce was finalized through a lawyer. My dad knows a lot of people, many of whom are lawyers or accountants, people who know the law. Thanks to one of my dad's contacts handling the divorce, I was able to receive compensation for the harassment I endured from my in-laws. My dad then told the bank that father-in-law's company wasn't worth saving. Heeding my dad's advice, the bank abandoned New Wave Corporation, which went bankrupt a month later. My dad also took action against Carter. He asked a police officer he knew to investigate my husband's company on some pretext. Turns out, small companies often engage in illegal activities, and the CEO was caught evading taxes. That company also went bankrupt due to the CEO's arrest. Mother-in-law was a homemaker, so my dad didn't do anything to her, but she's probably panicking since her husband and son both lost their jobs. I can picture her frantic state. When I happened to see mother-in-law in town, she looked frail and on the verge of collapsing. This whole experience made me realize the huge gap between the ideal and reality in married life. I was harassed by my in-laws and got no help from the husband who should have been my main support. Yet the reason I'd consider marrying again is to give back to my loving father by letting him see his grandchildren. For now, I'm on my own, but someday I hope to meet someone truly wonderful